in our eternal spiritual form. This is mukti, liberation. And the final topic is ashraya, nirodho muktir ashraya. Ashraya means that one topic, that one thing, that one being who is the shelter of all. Ashraya, and of course that is Krishna. And it's described many times that all of those other 9 topics are simply to bring us to the point of understanding our position in relation to the Ashraya, in relation to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna is the Ashraya. In that part of the Bhagavatam, in the 2nd canto, it specifically said that the Ashraya is the Param Brahman. Param Brahman means the supreme spiritual being, the supreme spiritual entity, not ordinary Brahman, impersonal spirit, but Param Brahman, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Param Brahma, Param Dhamma, Pavitram Paramam Bhavan, Purusham Shashvatam Divyam Adi Devam Adam Ajam Vibho. That the Ashraya, the shelter of everything, is Krishna, who is Param Brahma, the supreme spiritual being. Param Dhamma. Dhamma means he's the abode of everything. He's the resting place of everything in creation. Pavitram Paramam Bhavam, and he's the supreme person and the supreme pure, the purifier of everything. Purusham Shashvatam Divyam, he's the eternal, divine, spiritual being. Adi Devam, superior to and first among all of the devas, among all the demigods. Krishna is first and foremost among all of them. And Ajam Vibhum, he is the supreme powerful being who is never born, never created like an ordinary material being. So this is the Ashraya, the shelter of all, Krishna. This is echoed, of course, in 111 Bhagavatam, which is the beautiful summary of the entire Bhagavatam, that he's the source of everything, he's the resting place of everything, the source of all energies, the protector of everything. It's echoed in Vedanti Tat Tattva Vidhat Tattvam Yaj Jnanamavayam Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavaniti Shabdite, that he's the supreme spiritual being known by all the sages. So this is Krishna, he's the Ashraya. Ashraya literally means the shelter or resting place of everything. In the 2nd chapter of Chaitanya Charitamrita, this is described at some length. Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj, he is establishing that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the same Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the same Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam, the same original Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in doing that, he explains how Krishna is the shelter, the Ashraya of everything. And in that discussion, he quotes from Srila Sridhar Swami's Bhagavatam commentary. Dashame dashamam lakshyam ashri tashraya vigraham Shri Krishnakyam param dhamma jagadama namami tat. Dashame dashamam lakshyam. Dashame, you may be familiar, this means 10th. So he's saying in the 10th canto, the 10th of the 10 topics of Srimad Bhagavatam is being elucidated. So in the 10th canto, we find out about the Ashraya, Sri Krishna himself, who is the 10th topic of Srimad Bhagavatam. Krishna as the shelter of all. Ashri Tashraya Vigraham, he is the form under which the Ashrita, the sheltered, all take shelter. Ashri Tashraya Vigraham, he is the form of the shelter of all the sheltered, all those who need shelter. Shri Krishnakyam, and his name is Krishna, he's known as Krishna. Param Dhamma, he's the supreme abode of all. Jagat Dhamma Namami Tat. He's the Param Dhamma, Jagat Dhamma. He's the abode of everything, the supreme abode of all of the universes, all of the creation. Namami Tat, I offer my respectful obeisances unto him. And then Srila Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami says in his own words, Krishna Eka Sarva Shraya, Krishna Sarvadam, Krishnera Sharira, Sharva Vishwara Vishram. Krishna Eka Sarvashraya. Krishna is the one, Eka Sarvashraya, the shelter of everything. Krishna Sarvadam. Krishna is the abode of everything. Krishnara Sharira Sarva Vishwara Vishram. That the body of Krishna is the supreme resting place, the supreme shelter, the supreme abode of everything in creation. So this is Krishna as Ashraya. And in the purport there, Srila Prabhupada explains it further, which I'll read a little bit from. He says, two different principles are to be considered herein, namely Ashraya, the object providing shelter, and Ashrita, the dependence requiring shelter. The Ashrita exists under the original principle, the Ashraya. The first 9 categories described in the first 9 cantos of Srimad Bhagavatam, from creation to liberation, including the Purusha avatars, the incarnations, the marginal energy or living entities, and the external energy or material world, are all Ashrita. The prayers of Srimad Bhagavatam, however, aim for the Ashraya Tattva, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. The great souls, expert in describing Srimad Bhagavatam, have very diligently delineated the other 9 categories, sometimes by direct narrations and sometimes by indirect narrations, such as stories. The real purpose of doing this is to know perfectly the absolute transcendence Sri Krishna for the entire creation, both material and spiritual, rests on the body of Sri Krishna. So this is the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the purpose of all scripture, of all our sadhana, and the purpose of our lives is to understand that we are Ashrita. Krishna is Ashraya, Sarva Ashraya, the shelter of everything, and therefore, inescapably, we need to take shelter of him. This is the conclusion of everything. So once we know, at least theoretically, Krishna is Sarva Ashraya. What was that verse again? Krishna Sarva Ashraya. From Krishna Das Kaviraj. Krishna Eka Sarva Ashraya. Krishna is the one and only shelter of everything, including us. Then our path is fixed and our goal is fixed. Unlike poor Burton Green, who is jumping around. I'm feeling boxed in here. I'm feeling boxed in here. I'm feeling boxed in here. Taking shelter of Krishna is the opposite of being boxed in, because Krishna is everything. Krishna is everything. Everything is contained within Krishna. So it's not boxed in, rather this is unlimited freedom. And it's when we deny our position as Ashrita that we become boxed in. Just like in tomorrow's verse, Vyasadeva sees Krishna and he sees the illusory energy behind him. If we falsely accept the material energy as our Ashraya, as our false shelter, then we're boxed in. But if we accept Krishna as our shelter, then we're actually free. So how do you find, where do you go for Ashraya? You go to an ashram. So one ashram is like this Bhadarik ashram that Srila Vyasadeva is sitting in, it is meditating in, an actual place, an actual geographical place of shelter. It's Brahmanadyam Saraswatim. What's that? Brahmanadyam Saraswatyam Ashrama Paschime Tate, an actual geographical place. It's on the bank of the Saraswati River. Ashrama, he has a nice ashram, a nice bhajan kutir, a nice little setup there. Paschime Tate, on the western bank. Paschime, Pascha means west. Just like Srila Prabhupada is Paschatya Desha Tarine, he's delivering the Western world, so that same word, on the western bank of the Saraswati River. And what is the Saraswati River? Brahmanadyam. Prabhupada translates Brahmanadyam as on the bank of the river, intimately related with the Vedas. So Brahma means the Vedas, and Nadya means river. So it's a river intimately connected with the Vedas. Brahma also means spiritual or transcendental. or connected with the Brahmanas. So in all of these different definitions, the Saraswati River is a special place, a sacred river. It's in verse 3, Badari Shanda Mandite, it's surrounded by fruit trees. Badari is, how's it pronounced? Jujube or jujube fruit? Does anyone know what's the proper pronunciation of that fruit? Any volunteers know? Jujube or jujube? Anyway, Badari is, Prabhupada translates as berries, but this is this jujube fruit. I'm saying jujube because when I was a child, there was a candy called jujubes, which were sort of like gummy bears. So I'll say jujubes. So here's a beautiful ashram. It's up in the Himalayas, so surrounded by this beautiful mountain range and with fruit trees and on the bank of the Saraswati River. So this is the classic, perfect example of the beautiful ashram where the sages go to meditate. It has the fruit trees, he has the Bhajan Kutir, the sacred river. I think Chanakya Pandit says that you should never live in a place where there's no sacred river. So this is so important, and Prabhupada says, actually in that, for spiritual advancement of knowledge, a suitable place and there for Vyasadeva, the ashram. And this is the Vedic system. Actually, if you read like in, I think I'm losing my internet connection. Is it still good?
It's fine.
Fine. Okay, I got a notice.
Yeah.
I got a little notice saying the internet connection was shaky, but hopefully we'll hang in there. So if you read in Ramayana or Mahabharata, like in Mahabharata, when the Pandavas are living in the forest during their period of exile, they'll always come to the ashram of some sage, and they'll always say, "Oh, this ashram is so beautiful with the fruit trees and the deer, and what a wonderful atmosphere." And same thing in Ramayana, when Rama, Lakshmana, and Sita are in the forest, and many times they'll come to some sage's ashram and they'll just say, "Oh, what a wonderful place, what a beautiful place." So here's a little bit, I'll read a little couple of tidbits from Ramayana describing this. This is, they're approaching the ashram of Bharadwaj, Rishi Bharadwaj. They walked fast, entering the very heart of the forest. Sights which they had never seen before confronted their eyes, and they walked happily, feasting their eyes on the novel scenes and beautiful trees and flowers unknown to city dwellers. Rama said, "Lakshman, look there in the distance, close to the sacred spot, Sangama, where the golden waters of the Ganga merge with the midnight blue of the Yamuna. I can perceive a plume of smoke. I gather there is an ashram there, and rishis must be living in that ashram. I am sure we have reached the sacred spot, Sangama or Prayag. I am almost certain it is the ashram of the great sage Bharadwaj, which we are nearing. Look at this ashram and the beautiful spot where it is situated. The kshetra is sacred, this Sangama where the two great rivers mingle. If you so desire," Bharadwaj says, "you can spend your time here." And then actually they loved the place, but Rama said, "It's a little bit close to Ayodhya. If I spend my time here, then all the Ayodhya Vasis will be coming to see me and disturbing the atmosphere and everything." So it goes on, Bharadwaj was convinced that Rama spoke the truth when he voiced his fear about the nearness of the city to the ashram. He said, "Rama, 10 kroshas from here is a mountain by name Chitrakoot. It is as beautiful as the Gandhamadana mountain. All around this Chitrakoot are trees and waterfalls and lakes which will please the eye." And it goes on with a beautiful description. So these are some of the things of an ashram, at least in the traditional sense, the Rishi's ashram, that is this beautiful natural scenery and sacred river. In Vyasadev's case, it's the Saraswati River. In Bharadwaj's case, it's the Sangama of the Yamuna and Ganga and Saraswati, and the mountains and the fruit trees and the deer are roaming and a beautiful Bhajan Kutir. And this is a wonderful place for performing spiritual activities. Many times Srila Prabhupada would quote this from the English poet William Cowper. Let's see, I think I have this saved here. I can read this. This is William Cowper, who said, "God made the country and man made the town. What wonder then that the health and virtue, gifts that can alone make sweet the bitter draught that life holds out to all, should most abound and least be threatened in the fields and groves." So this is the beauty and the nature of a outside the city, the rural atmosphere, the forest atmosphere. Sometimes Prabhupada would also say that the city, no, what is it? That the forest is in the mode of goodness, the city is in the mode of passion, and the liquor shop or the brothel are in the mode of ignorance. So there's this recognition that the beautiful material atmosphere is so wonderful for performing spiritual activities. Not only the wonderful spiritual atmosphere, but an ashram like Vyasadev's or Bharadwaj's is a place exclusively devoted to spiritual activities with regulated spiritual activities and no intrusion of, or less intrusion of material atmosphere into that ashram. That's why the traditional Vedic system for the brahmacharis was to go to the Gurukul, which was also the ashram of training. And at least in the old days of ISKCON, many devotees came and moved into the ashram, moved into the temple. And that can be a very great advantage, that you're completely surrounded by this atmosphere of devotional service. It's regulated. In the ashram, if you don't get up for Mangalarti, someone's going to come and just, I heard here in Philadelphia many years ago, Ravindra Swarup, before Mangalarti time, he would come into the ashram banging a gong or playing cartels and waking everyone up. And when you're at home in your home, if you don't get up for Mangalarti, no one's going to say anything to you. So there's a lot of benefit to that ashram official, you could say official ashram or physical ashram situation. The association, the regulation, the concentrated experience. In the ashram, I also had experience living in the ashram when I first moved into the temple. And the idea is that everything is organized around the principles of devotional service. And if you want to do something material, if you want to do something Maya, you have to make a special plan and organize it and then go out and do it. But the spiritual activities are part of the normal circumstance of every day. Whereas outside the ashram, the normal pressure is you go to work, you do this, you do that. And if you want to do some spiritual activity, you have to make a special plan and a special organization to do it. Now, it's not that one is necessarily better than the other. They both have their advantages and disadvantages. But this is the advantage of the ashram, the physical ashram. So another kind of ashram is the Varnashram system, which is not a geographical place, but a social institution of ashram, of shelter. Here, in Varnashram, the ashram is brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, and sannyasi, and all of these are ashrams. Again, the meaning is the same, that they're shelter, a shelter of, instead of a geographical place or a building, it's a social institution that provides shelter for everyone to pursue spiritual life. Reading from today's purport again, let's see. An ashram is a place where spiritual culture is always foremost, Prabhupada says. It does not matter whether the place belongs to a householder or a mendicant. The whole Varnashram system is so designed that each and every status of life is called an ashram. This means that spiritual master is the common factor for all. The brahmacharis, the grihastas, the vanaprasthas, and the sannyasis all belong to the same mission of life. So this is the purpose of the ashrams of the Varnashram system. They are all shelter and organization and a social institution for shelter, for giving shelter wherein one can approach the supreme shelter of all, Sri Krishna. Vishnu Purana explains this. Varnashrama Charvata Purushena Parakpuman Vishnur Aradyate Panta. That the Varnashram system is, its purpose and its meaning is Vishnur Aradyate Panta. It's meant for worshiping Lord Vishnu. It's meant for worshiping the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Nanyata Toshakaranam. It's not meant for anything else, for any other reason besides that. Goes on. This is from the Bhagavatam. Atak Pombir Dvija Shrestha. O best of the Brahmanas. Varnashram Vibhagasha. Swanushtitasya Dharmasya. Some said here, Haritoshnam, that the best performance, the ideal performance of Varnashram Dharma, which is everyone's duty, Swanushtitasya Dharmasya, everyone's personal duty to perform as part of Varnashram, but that performance is not just some ritualistic thing. It's not some pride in being a Brahmana. It's not some power trip of being a Kshatriya. It's not the money grubbing or the sense gratification of being a Vaishya or a Sudra. It's some said here, Haritoshanam. The goal is the same for everyone. Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas. The goal is the same for everyone. Some said here, Haritoshanam, that the actual perfection of Varnashram Dharma is if you could please the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Hari. This is the actual use, the actual purpose of Varnashram, and specifically the ashrams, Brahmachari, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas. The purpose is the same and the goal is the same for all of them. And if you have a Varna and you have an ashram, or even if you're living in an ashram, or you're brahmachari or sannyasi or grihastha, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if you're not doing that, if you're not doing it to please Krishna, and if you're not gaining an attraction for hearing the topics of Krishna, Isha Anukata, we heard about one of the topics of Bhagavatam, hearing the topics of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If you don't do that from your so-called ashram, either living in an ashram or the social institution of ashram, then Dharma Swanustitasya Pumsam Vistvakshena Katasriyat Not Padayad Yadiratim Shrama Evahi Kevalam. Then your so-called ashram is a waste of time. There are so many yoga ashrams and different ashrams. Before I became a devotee within ISKCON, I spent some time in a ashram of a different impersonalist group. And it was an ashram, they called an ashram, Arunachala ashram. And I learned a lot there actually, but it's not really an ashram because it didn't bring about devotion to Krishna. Its explicit purpose was not to give devotion to Krishna or give attraction to Krishna. Therefore, this is not a real ashram. And then that sort of ashram, Shrama Evi Kevalam. Ashram without attraction to Krishna, Shrama Evi Kevalam, simply a useless waste of time. So this is the real purpose of living in an ashram, the real purpose of the ashram dharma, or the real purpose of any shelter that we take today is to attain Krishna. Ashram dharma, it's called an Varnashram dharma. Savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktir adhoksajay ahaitukya yenat masuprasidati. That this is the real purpose of every dharma and of every shelter we accept. If you're a brahmachari, the real shelter is savai pumsam paro dharmo yato bhaktir adhoksajay. The real goal is devotion to Krishna. If you decide you need to get married, if that's the shelter you need, then the purpose of that is the same thing. You need to cultivate devotion to Krishna. And if you're Vanaprastha or if you're sannyasi, the purpose is still the same. You need to approach Krishna and cultivate devotion to Krishna. This is actual ashram. whether it's on the bank of the Saraswati or whatever our living situation is. We need to make it an ashram. We may need to make it a spiritual atmosphere and a spiritual place, actual physical place where devotion to Krishna is foremost. And that's how we live in this world, by making our ashram, by making our place, our livelihood, our home, our family, our situation as far as possible for devotion of Krishna. We make the living situation simplified. We make it honest. We make it as not encumbering as possible. What's that? Nectar of Instruction describes different things to help your devotional service. Utsahan nischaya daryat tatat karma pravartanat sango tyagat sato vrite sadbir bhakti prasidyati. That these 6 things help perfect your devotional service: being enthusiastic, working with great confidence, having patience, properly performing all the activities of devotional service, giving up bad association, and sato vrite. In the translation there, Prabhupada translates sato vrite as following in the footsteps of the great devotees, the great acharyas. But sato vrite also means that your vritti, your livelihood, needs to be sato. It needs to be honest. It needs to be simple. It needs to be not sinful or not cheating or not gross or not turning you away from devotional service. This is also sato vrite. So those of us who don't live in the temple, who are not in the physical ashram, we have to make our home an ashram with proper livelihood, with a proper home, with a peaceful home, with family. We have to have a temple in our home. We have to worship Krishna. We have to chant Hare Krishna. Prabhupada says that 4 things will make householder life perfect. That the family comes together for deity worship. The family comes together for kirtan. The family comes together for reading Srimad Bhagavatam, reading scripture. And the family prepares and honors prasadam together. These make grihastha life perfect. Then this is the perfect ashram, and it's no less than the sannyasis or the brahmacharis or the vanaprashnas. And all of this is based on the philosophical understanding, you could say the Sambandha Gyan, that Krishna is the Ashraya, the Krishna Eka Sarva Ashraya. He's the one and only shelter of everything. And that we are Ashrita, we are the ones who are meant to take shelter under him. And if you understand that, then everything will fall into line, then everything will become clear. If we understand and are dedicated to the principle that Krishna is the shelter, then everything else will actually fall into place. Just like Bhagavad Gita says, Yavan Arta Udapane Sarvata Sampludodake Tavan Sarveshu Vedeshu Brahmanasya Vijanata. That there's the well which provides water, Udapane, the well, the individual small localized source of water. And then there's the Samplut Sarvata Sarvo Platodake. There's the big overflooded, gigantic ocean of water. And they're both water. And Krishna says that if you understand the purpose behind the water, then all the purposes that can be performed by the well are also revealed in the great ocean of water. So if we understand the purpose behind ashram, behind our ashram of whether we're married or not, or sannyasi or not, our ashram, meaning our living situation, our actual house, if we understand the purpose behind it, that Krishna is Ashraya and we are Ashrita, then our house becomes an ashram as good as the ashram of Vyasadeva or the ashram of Bharadwaj or any of these ashrams. It becomes just as good. You may be single, married, sannyasi. You may live in the temple. You may live at home. You could be rich, poor. None of these matter if you understand and embrace the principle of Krishna Eka Sarva Ashraya, that Krishna is the shelter of all, the ultimate purpose of all, then everything is very clear. We make our physical ashram, our physical living place, as clean and simple, as peaceful, as natural as possible, as conducive to spiritual life as possible. But the real principle is not to make the material situation perfect, but to just make it conducive so we can embrace the real goal, which is approaching the Acarya Krishna. If you become a sannyasi and develop pride in your position or pride in your renunciation, or if you become a grihasta and get too absorbed in family matters, or like a sannyasi, one of the rules for a sannyasi, I don't know if this is just a common saying or an actual scriptural rule about sannyasis not crossing the ocean, but Prabhupada was not a stickler about sannyasis not crossing the ocean. And thank God he wasn't a stickler on this. He crossed the ocean to save the world. So it's not the rules and regulations of the ashram or the physical ashram. We make those as conducive as possible, as long as the purpose behind it, just like the purpose behind the well of water and the purpose behind the ocean of water is understood, that Krishna is Ashraya and we are Ashrita. Then the external situation will fall into place, and it's actually secondary. That's why it's described, Gyane prayasam udapasya namanti eva, jivanti sanmukaritam bhavati avartam. That you give up speculative knowledge, you give up jnana and karma, completely reject it. And jivanti sanmukaritam bhavati avartam. You make jivanti, you make your life, you devote your life to sanmukaritam bhavati avartam, to hearing the topics of Krishna from the mouths of the great devotees. That's your life, jivanti. This is your life. Then if you do that, stanestita, you remain wherever you are. You don't have to change ashrams. You don't have to move from this town to that town or here to there, or like poor Burton Green. You don't have to jump up in one place and sit down somewhere else and then get up and sit down somewhere else. Stanestita, you could just remain wherever you are. Stanestita, Shrutikatam Tanuvan Manobir, you hear about Krishna from the mouths of pure devotees and you worship that kata, that Krishna kata, you worship it with Tanuvan Manobir, with your body. You offer physical obeisances. And with your van, with your vak, with your words, you chant these topics of Krishna. And Manobir, you consider them and remember them and meditate upon them within your mind. Then if you do that, stanesita, the external situation is secondary. You devote some energy to making it nice, to making it peaceful, to making it conducive, but it's secondary, it's supportive, it's not the prime thing. And then if you do that, ye prayaso jita jito pyasitais trilokyam, Krishna, the shelter of all, he's Ashraya, he's the shelter of everything. And as the shelter of everything, no one can conquer him, no one can surpass him. But if you do that, if you take shelter of the topics of Krishna in this complete way, then Krishna, who is unconquerable, becomes conquered by such a devotee. So this is ashram. This is the ashram we want to live in. And ashram, again, an ashram is a physical living place, like the ashram of Vyasadeva. It's the place where you live. Or in the Varnasrama system, an ashram is the social situation in which you live. So it's your living situation. But our living situation, jivanti, our life, jivanti sanmukaritam bhavati avartam, we make this our living situation, hearing and chanting about Krishna. We make that our ashram. That hearing and chanting about Krishna is our ashram. And this is the perfection of life. Make that the ashram that you live in. Not here, there, physically or socially, but our ashram is absorption in Krishna consciousness. Specifically in hearing and chanting, but all the processes of Krishna consciousness. What's that? Shravanadi Shuddha Chitte Karye Udoy. That what's the first line of that? Can't remember now. Shravanadi, that beginning with hearing. Shuddha Chitta, your consciousness becomes purified, and the Krishna consciousness, which is present in your heart, will automatically arise like the sun rising in the sky when we make this our ashram, the performance of devotional service. Hare Krishna. Thank you very much. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Is there any question or comment or discussion?
Hare Krishna, Acharya Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Jonah. Good morning.
Good morning. Very, very nice class, and you discussed it from a variety of angles. This idea of ashram. Speaking of the physical ashram, there's a sense that I guess ashram and ashram life have become somewhat, I don't know, either outdated or less applicable. That it was maybe something that was of a certain generation. There's a period of time when people were more accustomed to maybe kind of living in communities together. It was for people that were kind of like still just trying to figure out what life is about. But yet we hear in the references you were giving back from the Mahabharata, Ramayana, and throughout India, that this was just kind of somewhat of a natural way of living. Devotee, His Grace Kalakanta Prabhu just wrote a book called Ashramites, an Endangered Species. And in his effort to try to bring back this concept of ashram and how important it is, and he makes the point, especially for an American, having a strong ashram life in the beginning of Krishna consciousness, in the beginning of their practice of devotional service, is extremely important, because that can hold them together as they go through the different other types of ashrams like married life and such later on. But it's something that's kind of missing now, that structured level of ashram. And I just wanted to see if you could comment on that, or talk about that. Is it something of the past in your mind? Is it irrelevant, or is it something that we can actually revive?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I agree with, I haven't seen that book, but from what you described, I actually pretty strongly agree with Kalakanta Prabhu was the one who wrote the book, he said. So I actually agree with that. I think there's a lot lost by not having that ashram experience in the temple. Like I said, it's a real saturation, full absorption in devotional service, very lesser opportunities for illusion and different kinds of material activities. It's more suitable for an unmarried person, usually, just as a general rule, not as an absolute rule, more suitable for an unmarried person than a married person, more suitable for a younger person and an older person. Would I like to see it come back? Yes, I would. Will it come back, or is it possible to bring it back? That I'm not as convinced of. I think it's very valuable, and I think it's a loss that many devotees didn't go through that. I also think it's a loss that those who were in the ashram, like myself, also sort of had to suffer when the inevitable time came for leaving the ashram, inevitable for 99% of people. And then you are not very good at entering, quote unquote, material life, the life of marriage and making a living and doing all that. Uh, I was pretty unprepared for that, and I'm still, failing pretty miserably at that endeavor after a half a century. So everything has good points and drawbacks. But yes, I think that Varnashram, that ashram experience is valuable, extremely valuable and important. It gives you a very different and unique and powerful appreciation of devotional service and a little different point of view on performing devotional service. So I think that's a valuable thing. If you speak to any older devotee, 90 some odd percent of older devotees went through that at least to some degree, and they can tell you about it. It's not an absolute necessity. So many devotees are coming without that and thriving, but it's a valuable thing. And if possible, at least for some people, it should be brought back, or even a householder. Just like householders, grihasta, mundane householders, when they have a little time saved up and they have a little money saved up, they go on a cruise or go on a vacation or fly here or fly there. So a devotee, a grihasta who maybe didn't have that ashram situation, take a vacation and spend a few weeks, spend a month in the temple and see what it's like, that full absorption, and get an appreciation for it. It'll point out a lot of your anartas that you have, where you may think, oh, I'm doing great here as a grihasta, but then when you're in a situation where devotional service is demanded of you, in a more concentrated way, it'll help expose your anartas, hopefully in a constructive way, to see where you need to work on yourself. So there's a lot of benefit from it. There's also downside, like back in the quote unquote, the old days of living in the ashram, there was a tendency, just like I talked about how a sannyasi may feel proud of being a sannyasi and look down on others. So there's definitely a tendency in ISKCON in the old days that if you weren't living in the ashram, you were like a second class or third class devotee. Anyone, even someone who was practicing very nicely, but if they weren't living in the ashram, they were held in some degree of disdain. Sometimes we would call them fringies or have lesser opinion of them. So that's also an anarta that needs to be gotten rid of. But all in all, I'd say, yes, it's a valuable experience. And if it could be brought back, great.
Thank you, Prabhu, for speaking about that. I wanted to that last point you just made about how during the period of time you were speaking about how if you weren't living in an ashram, you were considered to be a second or third class devotee.
Right.
I see kind of remnants of that in the opposite way now, that if
yes,
a person decides that they want to, it's kind of like, okay, they obviously can't achieve any type of material success, so I guess they just they can't be that smart, they can't be that intelligent, therefore they have to kind of give up on those material endeavors and live in an ashram. And that also isn't probably most of the time accurate. It could be in some isolated situations, not.
Yeah, I've seen expressions like that before. And also sometimes you see on, I've never seen it here in Philly, anyone I know, but I've seen sometimes expressing in social media that devotees who are too strict are sometimes looked down on or not trusted for being too strict. I always found that amusing because, it used to be that if you were a strict devotee, you wouldn't trust a devotee who wasn't very strict. Now, sometimes there's distrust of devotees who are too strict. So everything has a potential for misuse. What's that in Madhurya Kadambini? There's a description of different kinds of anartas. And there's anartas arising from a performance of karmic activities. And there's anartas arising from performance of jnana or meditative or search for knowledge activities. And there's also anartas arising from performance of devotional service. So it's not that a devotional service itself causes anartas, but in the performance of devotional service, there are situations which an immature person will misunderstand and cause anartas. Just like naturally, if you're successful in preaching, you'll get some respect, you may get some funds, you may get some appreciation, and you may start getting puffed up from that. Or you may misuse your position or abuse others because of your position. So that's an anarta arising from devotional service. So those who are in the ashram are also prone to different anartas because of that very situation. And those who are householders are also prone to anartas because of their situation. And there should, and like Kalakanta says, there should be both. They're actually both valuable. And if we don't reject the Ashramites and the Ashramites don't reject the Grihastas, and if we work together, then we could, support each other and learn from each other, and we could sort of interact, and each of us will rub off the rough edges of each other, that the Grihastas will not be too self-satisfied with their material position, and the Ashramites will not be too puffed up about their imagined spiritual superiority, and we can all work together. Because ultimately, there's only one ashram. There's the one ashram of being under the ashraya of Krishna. So all these other, individual ashrams are not illusory, but they're secondary to that one ashram that we're all under Krishna. Is that okay?
Yes. Let's see if anybody else has any questions or comments, conversation about this topic.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Who's that, Sean? Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. I just wanted to make a comment, and just this whole conversation in class is really wonderful in regards to these ashrams, just having come to Krishna consciousness really only a few years ago and trying to navigate how to make progress in this kind of world of ISKCON that we have right now, and not really fitting into a particular ashram so much myself, like kind of feeling like, I want to be in the brahmachari ashram, but like I have a, family kind of half the time. It's interesting dynamic that I have going on, but I just
not an uncommon thing in this day and age.
It's like, well, just trying to understand it and find guidance in that, unconventional Vedic situation that so many people find themselves in the modern world. Like from what I can see and just in my own life, it's very categorized, like, the ashram situation, but mostly myself, for sure, I don't fit into that, into any of those categories. So I think ISKCON has a big challenge in that sense, especially in the West, in like how to accommodate so many different people in so many different situations trying to come to Krishna consciousness without a clear categorization.
Yes. Yes, that is a challenge. That's one of the reasons Prabhupada was interested in establishing some sort of Varnashram system or community or whatever, because when it's done properly, it really does provide a framework for a peaceful and conducive life where things go more smoothly, that allows you to perform devotional service. But we have to be realistic, we don't have that now. And even those who are properly or happily married, we're also not like Vedic Grihastas either. And the brahmacharis in the temple are also not really like Vedic brahmacharis either. And even the sannyasis today are not really like traditional Vedic sannyasis in so many ways. So one way to look at it is that we're all falling short of that technical Varnashram standard. And we all have to sort of adjust and, find our own personal way through it that's best. And where possible, we can adopt some of the Vedic standards where those standards are reasonable and applicable and helpful to us. But other than that, I don't really have an answer or a solution. It is difficult. It's Kali Yuga. We're not going to have a perfect Varnashram situation for anyone. So we all have to sort of muddle through the best we can. And the more we're convinced that Krishna is the ultimate shelter, then the easier and clearer and, the more guidance we'll get how to navigate that maze or that swamp of life, better. I don't have like a specific response, except recognizing that, it is an issue. It is a problem.
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the big takeaways I got here, was just recognizing that the foundation of all the ashrams is that devotional service to Krishna, and recognizing that Krishna is the source of everything. Everything resides within Krishna. So as long as we can ground ourselves in that, then we've got the base to deal with whatever's going on within this Kali Yuga world that we're dealing with.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his conclusion was Naham Vipro Nachar Narapatir Napi Vaisho Nasujo Naham Varni Nacha Griya Patir Vanasto Yatirva Kintu Pradyan Nikila Parmananda Purnam Ritab Der Gopi Bhartu Pada Kamale or Dasa Dasa Das. He said, I'm not a brahmachari, grihasta, vanaprastha, sannyas. I'm not a Sudra, Vaishya, Sudra, Vaishya, Kshatriya, or Brahmana. I'm none of these things. I'm the servant of the servant of the servant of Krishna. So that's the conclusion. And, like I said, where possible, we could institute some of these principles, Varnashram principles, where they're relevant and where they're useful for us, even if we're in a mixed situation. And we're all in a mixed situation. So we just have to use our intelligence, use the guidance of Shastra, the guidance of others to find what works for us and, muddle on the best we can.
Thank you, Prabhu.
It's an issue. It's a genuine issue that we all have to deal with. And others, like you say about yourself, may have to deal with it in a more particular way. But we're all mixed varnas in Kali Yuga. What's the Varna Sankara? Varna Sankara means that the varnas, it's all mixed up. You don't know who's what. So that's everyone in Kali Yuga, actually.
Yeah.
But it's a good point.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you.
Anything else? It's a little late after 9, so if there's any announcements or not.
Let's see. We have the Sunday Feast program today. Starts at 4:30. We hope to see everybody there. We have Ananda Vilas Prabhu who will be coming to speak. He's devotee from out of town. He's been here before, from the Harrisburg Gita Nagari area.
Oh, sure. Nice
He'll be
devotee.
speaking about Bhagavad Gita today. Yes. And then also we have some, just want to mention, yesterday a group of devotees went out on book distribution for the December Srila Prabhupada book marathon. We went to Rittenhouse Square, met some nice people, and distributed, we'll do an account of the number of books over today at the Sunday program. But also, Mother Shobha Radhe, are you still there? I know that you were also going out. I don't know if that's today or yes. I think yesterday. I don't know what the situation is. Maybe you can report on what's happening.
Yeah, sorry about that. Mother Vindhyavali did go yesterday to Apna Bazaar. She spent quite a few hours there. I spent just a little bit of time with her. She was there for, I think, 4 hours. And today we are going to Stonegate Apartments in Devon. So we are going to meet here at 11:30. we have a little bit of a program. At 11:30 we meet here. We will read a little bit, talk about what it is we are endeavoring to do. Then at 12:30 we will go to the complex, spend a couple of hours, come back again, talk about our experiences, and then head to the temple. So if you would like to join us, 11:30 in Berlin, and if anybody wants, you can. I can send you the address where we are meeting.
Jai, that sounds awesome.
Yes, so every weekend, I think, next week we will promise to send you the information. We were a little disorganized about yesterday, but Mother Vindyavali did go to Apna Bazaar. That store has been very, very, very conducive to this, very accommodating us. So I think we will be there every Friday and Saturday. We'll have more information.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Excellent. Excellent news.
Good encouragement, little bit encouragement was there yesterday. So we did good. Started
Good.
with distribution.
Yeah. Yeah. Now this is really, really positive.
Liked it.
Yeah, positive news. So we had this weekend. We'll have 3 different spots that we would have, been to for book distribution, and this will continue through the month of December, and then hopefully continue one after that.
Yes.
Okay, everybody, have a wonderful Krishna conscious day.
Bye.
Thank you so much, Acharya Prabhu, for
Thank
a
you very
wonderful
much.
class.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. We'll see you all tonight.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Go on, Namaha.
Hare Krishna.